All right, so we had a wild week in the stock market this week, man. Listen, starting off with like 1,000 point drop on Monday, another 1,000 point drop on Wednesday, nearly 3,000 points by the end of the week. It was a wild week in the stock market this week, and I explained to y'all how this is kind of about the coronavirus, but it's not in the way that you would think. All right. None of the investors are worried about a global pandemic. Okay. No one's worried about a global pandemic. That's patently retarded. You probably should, if anybody tells you that that's what they're worried about, legitimately, like, you should smack them in the face. Because the truth of the matter is, it's what this coronavirus has done. It exposed how bananas and how much we're tied to the global market and what globalism has done and how reliant we really are upon China. That's the truth of the matter. All right. Because what really happened was that you had international companies, or these U.S. companies who are fully reliant upon China to build all their goods. Places like Ford. Yeah, all y'all Ford fans out there. Apple, Amazon, Google, places of these nature that can't get shipments in. All right, because the factories were all closed down over in China. They had nearly 300 million people living under quarantine. This is important to know. This is important to remember. All right, these were global supply lines that were completely messed up. All right, they were completely interrupted, and they ended up on a level where people couldn't get goods. All right, and companies still can't get goods. And just recently, they have stood here and started to allow factories just this week to reopen. Now, that's good for the moment. All right, I'm gonna show you this. I'm gonna show you the thing at the moment. All right, here's an article from NPR. This came out yesterday. It says, as new coronavirus cases slow in China, factories start reopening. As new cases of coronavirus infections slow in China, the country is gradually getting back to work. Authorities and businesses are taking a range of measures. Local governments are chartering buses for workers. Some companies are buying out entire hotels to house quarantined staff. A temporary shuttered movie studio is even loaning employees to factories that are short on labor. Strict quarantine measures designed to stop the spread of the new coronavirus prevented nearly 300 million migrant workers from returning to their jobs, shutting down one of the largest economies in the world for nearly 3 weeks and paralyzing global supply chains. That's the really big thing right there, is the paralyzing global supply chains. Now, the government is advising local officials to balance seemingly contradictory mandates, use all methods possible to limit the further spread of a deadly new virus while meeting annual economic growth targets. Early this month, at a top-level political meeting, China's leader Xi Jinping called for an all-out people's war against the deadly virus. But at the same meeting, he also urged officials to continue to reach goals and tasks of economic and social development this year. And also, beginning last week, factories across China started slowly reopening. At least 8 provinces and regions downgraded their emergency levels, loosening the most draconian restrictions on movement to allow people to leave their homes and return to work. But the biggest bottleneck continues to be a shrunken workforce, as many returning workers must be quarantined for 2 weeks before entering factories. A late February survey by the Chong Kong Graduate School of Business found that 45% of firms surveyed had no way to resume work, mostly due to labor shortages. Just 11 predicted their production capacity would reach between 80 and 100% by the end of February. So, China's Purchasing Managers Index, a measure compiled by China's State Statistics Industry and the industry group that measures manufacturing and service sector activities, plunged to 35.7 in February from January's 50%, or 50. The index is on a 100-point scale. Numbers below 50 indicate activity contracting. According to the European and German Chambers of Commerce, 59% of their member companies in China responding to an internal survey claim the outbreak and China's containment measures have had a high impact on their businesses. 48% said they would lower their financial outlook by more than 10% for the first half of 2020. Another survey released Thursday by the American Chamber of Commerce in China found that nearly a third of American firms surveyed are facing increased costs and sinking revenues as a result of disruptions to China's operations and travel. Especially for large-scale companies that are integral to global supply chains, time is of the essence. One such company is Ningbo Yuxing Auto Technology, which manufacturing machine parts for European and American cars in the Chinese port city of Ningbo in Zhejiang province. Our clients are international. They didn't stop operations during the outbreak. Unlike other companies who sell to Chinese clients who all had to shut down, we really have to get back to work, said Cloud Zhao. Xing Sheng, sales director, tells NPR the factory is now running at 80% of its pre-virus operating capacity. Zhao says after going through an expedited permit process with local authorities, all businesses must navigate a lengthy list of requirements to obtain permission from local authorities to reopen. First, Zhang provided officials with a full list of employees, which in turn was vetted using big data methods, says Zhao. Then workers had to enter their national ID numbers and phone numbers into a new provincial app created as part of the virus control efforts, which identifies the cities and provinces they visited in the past 2 weeks. Zhusheng Auto must quarantine for 2 weeks anyone who spent time in a heavily infected area before allowing them to enter the factory. To protect healthy workers, the automaker also had to show teams of inspectors that is stocked with masks and disinfectants and has enough space to serve as quarantine wards. So, all of this, all right, is on the company's hands. All of it, all right? And on top of that, at any time, the government can come in and shut any of this nonsense down, right? And expect some of these companies to end up having workers that get quarantined and people around them who are going to get quarantined. All right, I really don't think that this coronavirus is as bad as anybody says. It's basically a flu. It is what it is. Michael Chen, a manager at an electronics manufacturing plant in the neighboring province of Jiangsu, says his company has rented an entire hotel now empty because there are no travelers to quarantine his returning workers. His plant, normally staffed by around 2,000 workers, backed up to 70% of its pre-virus operation levels. He said, but revenues likely only be a half of what they were before the outbreak. He said, our sales have been badly hit. It has been a big hassle. It's not that demand is actually down, but some of our supply chains are not coming back, especially if they're in Hubei province. Hubei is the epicenter of Chinese coronavirus outbreak, where most of the coronavirus 2,800 plus deaths have occurred. Chen says every week he has to buy thousands of surgical masks, which now cost 3 times the normal price for his workers. The city of Kunshan, where Chen works, chartered buses to ferry workers back to work, but Chen says they're not enough. You have to mainly rely on yourself. A lot of this is outward-oriented propaganda. In reality, the measures were not enough. Last weekend, Xi teleconference speech to 1,700 officials promising the economic impact will be short-lived. China's central bank has also said it will make it easier for small and medium businesses to take out loans or repay debt, perhaps even cut taxes, but more specific measures haven't been spelled out yet. We haven't received very specific policies on how the central or local government will support private businesses, but they trust they are also waiting for more specific information, said Zhao of Zhengzheng Auto. Cheng Fang, a partner in the independent research firm Plenum, says over-centralization of power in China's political system means policies can move slowly. It takes time, province to province, to comprehend what Xi Jinping is talking about, especially lower-ranking officials. They don't have the incentive to work on their own because of the risk. Because the risk, if they are at odds with the central policy from central decision making, they may be purged. That's always a risk, being fucking purged. Calls by the central government to ease access to loans and delay paying off corporate debts are also a sharp reversal from earlier instructions passed on to local governments. They have been told the entire year to focus on poverty alleviation, to focus on financial de-risking, which means they are originally under the impression to lower credit, explains Fang. Even if business owners manage to secure reopening permits, widespread labor shortages are still hampering full resumption of national production. Research released this week on Henan province, a major source of migrant labor for industrial hubs like Beijing and the Pearl River Delta, indicated that only 5% of migrant workers have been able to leave. To address the labor shortfall, regional authorities are prompting a plan they've dubbed employee sharing, which allows firms to borrow workers from places that remain shut down. Wow. Hangdian Group, a large private enterprise in Zhejiang province, resumed production of 2 of its factories in February after bringing employees from a subsidiary company. Hangdian World Studios, the world's largest film and television production site that doubles as a sprawling theme park, to work on the assembly lines. Employees who used to sell tickets at the theme park are now sorting and packing Hangdian's magnetic and lighting goods. According to Chinese state media, over 1,000 studio workers were temporarily hired to help with factory production, adoring the Apiola Pharmaceuticals, another Hangdian subsidiary. But when reached by phone, an Apiola administrator told NPR that hadn't happened. It would take too long to train studio workers, she explains, because they are unskilled and unsuitable for the technical task required in their factory lines. Okay, so with that being said, I wanted to make sure that y'all understood what exactly is going on in China right now. All right, because this is some legitimate bigger stuff, right? When it really comes down to it, this is some shit that is gonna affect the U.S. economy long term, right? And this is all right. I don't want to say long term, it's gonna affect us for years and years and years and years and years to come, but it's gonna affect us over the next few months. All right, and the fact that the stock market's rallying is only telling me that what the Fed came out and said they're going to lower interest rates and probably print some money because that's what the Fed does, right? They may even end up buying corporate bonds and, municipal bonds and, more treasuries, whatever the nonsense might be. I know that they're out here trying to stabilize the yield curve at the moment. But the reality is that they can do very, very little, all right? The only positive thing the Fed has going for them is that we are the cleanest dirty shirt in the hamper at the moment. In other words, the rest of the world, when there's instability, buys our dollars. There's a massive drain of our dollars out of our economy, which means we get to export our inflation to the rest of the world. And so when the Fed goes on its buying sprees to do whatever it wants to do, it will stand here and be allowed to continue to do this in a physical sense because of the fact of how strong our currency is. Now, here's the issue. It doesn't matter what the Fed does, right? It legitimately does not matter what the Fed does. And I'm going to show you why, okay? Because this is how long does it take to ship from China to the United States? In addition, how long it takes to cross the ocean physically, customs handling, and other processes can also affect the amount of time it takes to ship goods to China. It can take 33 days to prepare a shipment for transit, and once a ship lands in the U.S., it can take up to 6 days before the cargo is released. If you are a trader shipping from China to the U.S., there are many options you can choose from. The shipping options that are best for you depends on the urgency, preference, and cost. Once your preferences are, the freight forwarder we'll set the shipping into motion. Okay, so now let's look at this here. All right, when you ship small packages, it's better off to fly through the air. Regular post goes whatever. You using express shipping, air freight, shipping to China by sea. If your package weighs over 500 kilograms, ocean freight is the most affordable mode of shipping. Ocean freight offers excellent economies of scale. Some companies have started offering a premium service, usually called expedited freight, which costs more than the usual ocean freight. All right. Ocean freight rates, just like air freight rates, freight forwarders don't charge the same rate. So shop around. All right. Hang on. Shipping lead times. So when you're shipping in China, the cost of missing sales is sometimes more important than the freight cost. For regular post, rules of thumb for lead times are 1 to 2 weeks, while that of express freight is 3 days. Also, the rule of thumb for air freight is 8 to 10 days and 30 to 40 days for ocean freight. Let's read that again. 30 to 40 days for ocean freight. So from right now, you have 30 to 40 days until these companies get resupplied in America with goods to be able to assemble products to be able to sell in the American economy. It's that simple. There's going to be a 30 to 40 days where companies have nothing to sell. It's that basic. It really is. It's that basic. This is what happens when you globalize your supply chain and it's not inside of your country. Because you can get anything by truck in this country to wherever you need to go in 3 days, short of Hawaii and Alaska, but inside the continental United States, right? 30 to 40 days. It's that simple, all right? They don't have a choice but to shut shit down. Yes, the cost of goods. Yes, inflation is going to go through the roof for like a month. I have no idea how this is going to affect the economy when it really comes down to it. Legitimately. And this is why I was telling Doku the other night, I really think that the price of oil is going down to like $25 a barrel. I really do. And the reason is because when you get to the point where there's just nothing to move, right? Trucks are going to sit. It is what it is. Like, legitimately. I mean, I told y'all last week, I got net short positions right now. And I lost my ass on Friday. I'll be honest with you. And that happens. You know what I'm saying? I'll gain it back this week, though. I promise you that. The Fed can't do anything about this. I mean, even if the market can stack enough sandbags, right, which it's going to try to do, legitimately, it's going to try to stack the sandbags to block whatever's coming. Even if it does, I don't think it can, right? Because, eventually it's going to get down to the point where people are screaming for stuff. It is what it is. You're going to have things that cannot go into the global supply chain. This is not about the coronavirus. It is not. This is not about whether or not vaccines. It's not about whether or not people get sick. It doesn't fucking matter. All right, people get the flu all the time. People are down for a week or so, whatever. Not major. Whatever. Right? This is 30 to 40 days of no freight coming in. Right? And there's not enough airplanes in the world, legit, to make up for the amount of goods that can be moved on a ship, legitimately, right? So 8 to 10 days, that's for air freight, right? That's for freight going onto an airplane. It's being shipped across China onto a plane, through customs, onto a plane, across the ocean, into America, which, is like a day process, whatever. Then they gotta get to America and go through customs, be loaded into it basically comes in and it goes into like a warehouse, and then, gets split up to where it all got to go, and then, put it back onto a truck, and it goes from a truck into a place, right? That takes 8 to 10 days, 30 to 40 days to get across the ocean because of how slow ocean freight moves. And this isn't a problem when you constantly have goods coming out of China. But we didn't constantly have goods coming out of China. A bunch of their factories were closed down that were making iPhones and car parts and tractor parts and all types of stuff. Legitimately. So, with that being said, I don't know what's going to happen. Legitimately. Right? But I do know there's no way the stock market can hold up to this. It is what it is. Anyway, man, I wanted to bring y'all this video, let y'all know what's going on, keep y'all up to date with the most latest information that Tom Pease can. All right? It's Tom Pease of Pnoid News. No situation. Like, share, and subscribe. Peace.